How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Black Metal Rebellion. I'm your host, Jesse Morgan, and today we are finally doing another Jesse Talks Metal episode. This is episode 20, and this is going to be the origins of thrash. I apologize that I haven't been on here in about probably 5 days, but I've been kind of trying to delve into this genre, listen to as many bands as I can, kind of do a bunch of research and stuff, just so I can kind of do this episode and talk to you guys a bit about thrash. So before I get into it, the reason why I got into thrash was because one day I was just kind of thinking about the origins of black metal, and the origins of black metal kind of contained, a little bit of death metal and a little bit of thrash metal, with basically lo-fi guitar work and more dissonance. And I figured, hey, if I enjoy, proto black metal and black thrash, I'm probably going to enjoy thrash. So basically, what I did was just asked a bunch of my friends on Facebook to just throw me a bunch of their favorite thrash bands, give me a list of what they felt was worth listening to, and I've been slowly going through them bit by bit, and I've been enjoying a lot, and I've been kind of cringing at a lot as well, but not bad. And I think it's a genre that I'm probably going to be diving into pretty hard in the next few months or so, just because I'm really enjoying it for whatever reason. And cool stuff. Anyway, so the origins of thrash basically started out as a kind of answer to the punk hardcore scene and the new wave of British heavy metal scene going on, and those two scenes kind of influenced how thrash got their speed and their aggression and their fast riffs and stuff like that. And the way it came about was sticking it to glam and hair metal in this. So the thrash was kind of an answer to that, and it was kind of like, well, we don't want to do that kind of stuff. We don't want to put on makeup and dress like women and prance around on stage all feminine like. We want to maintain some masculinity. We want to be like manly and just aggressive, and bring back kind of like this more testosterone filled version of metal. And the initial bands that kind of inspired this were bands like Motorhead, who started out in 1975. Motorhead was kind of a hard rock, metal, proto, new wave of British heavy metal band. Basically the fusion of punk and metal that kind of pioneered thrash. A lot of thrash bands kind of cited Motorhead as like some of their inspirations to do what they did. Same with Iron Maiden, which is a heavy metal band from 1975, which was also kind of heavy metal slash new wave of British heavy metal, cross between the two. A lot of bands have cited them as kind of inspiration, as well as Judas Priest, which is a heavy metal band from 1969, but their first album didn't come until 1974, being Rock-a-Rolla. Judas Priest being kind of the introducers of like spikes and leather as well, considering Rob Halford's kind of tendencies towards the gay leather fetish community, and that's kind of where he drew his inspiration from. He went in there, grabbed some leather, grabbed some spiked dom clothing, and wore that on stage, and thought that would be pretty crazy and like attention grabbing, and it was. And a lot of people didn't know that's where it originated, so it's kind of funny to see everyone seeing this like fetish, like gay fetish style of clothing become like the new manly like thing. So pretty amusing. And then another big kind of influence on a lot of early thrash bands was Venom, heavy metal and new wave of British heavy metal mixed with like proto black metal, and even a little bit of thrash here and there themselves. From 1981 was definitely a major influence on on thrash and extreme metal genres, like I said, like black metal and whatnot. So yeah, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Venom were basically the big 4 proto thrash bands that kind of really inspired the thrash bands we know from the 80s to do what they did. And basically, once again, it was just kind of in spite of the glam and hair metal, and they wanted to get away from that and really bring testosterone back to the metal scene. So yeah, so it's basically that, and then a kind of a fusion of punk, hardcore, and metal that really gave thrash its push. The main people in the thrash genre that you probably well know of is the big 4, and that being Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. Metallica formed in 1981, releasing their first album in July of 1983, Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All was actually originally supposed to be called Metal Up Your Ass, but the label really didn't think that would sell and thought that was too offensive for the mainstream metal community to like buy or whatever, so they had to change it to Kill 'Em All. I think it was really funny that it was originally going to be called Metal Up Your Ass. It just shows the kind of attitude they had back then of not giving a shit and just being like as in your face as possible. And then spinning off from Metallica after they kicked Dave Mustaine out for his kind of alcohol abuse and his like tendencies to be physically aggressive towards the band and stuff like that, and they had to kick him out, and he ended up forming the rival thrash band Megadeth, which formed in 1983, the same year Metallica dropped their first album. But Megadeth and Dave Mustaine didn't get around to dropping his first album until 1985, being like the eponymous "Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good." I actually had all of the Megadeth albums up till the one before Super Collider, and I don't know. I just couldn't get with Mustaine's vocals. I've always thought that he would have like a better shot of being like a better, well-received thrash band if he had a better vocalist. I think that's just my opinion, though. Like the riffs he does is just unmatched. A lot of the time, he is like the king of the thrash guitar for sure. He's definitely written some better stuff than Hetfield or Kirk Hammett, in my opinion. But the vocals, I couldn't do it, so I sold my my Megadeth albums back in the day. I think I might maybe get Killing Is My Business one more time in my collection, but that's probably all I'll do. But yeah, so that was Megadeth, and then the next in the big 4 is Anthrax, who formed in 1981. From the research I've done and some of the documentaries I've seen, they were pretty like stoked from what they heard coming from Metallica, and they were a big influence on them once they started like actually like writing further albums past the first one. And speaking of the first album, Fistful of Metal, that came out in 1984. It's unfortunate the amount of like tragedies and shit that's happened in Anthrax's career. Just some of their friends dying, some of their shit being burnt to the ground, labels not having enough money to put out their albums and freaking dropping off and all that shit. But the cool thing about Anthrax, though, is that they kind of, whether you like it or not, they kind of pioneered the kind of rap metal thing with Bring the Noise and I'm the Man and stuff like that. Really, really cool. So if you're a fan of like Rage Against the Machine or things of that nature, or Limp Bizkit, you really kind of have to thank Anthrax for bringing that kind of into the forefront and influencing those types of bands. So Anthrax is pretty cool. I'm definitely going to be getting like a bunch of their shit. And the last one on here, my least favorite of the big 4, Slayer, who formed in 1981. Their first album was in 1983, December 1983, so Metallica actually got the first album out there. But Slayer's first album was Show No Mercy, and yeah, they're probably one of the bigger influences on a lot of thrash bands. They've got a huge following, and I don't know, to me, Tom Araya's vocals are just awful. I can't stand the way he sings and presents his like thrash style vocals. It's very one note in my opinion. But the guitar work is pretty good. I'll give it that. Like, it's really good thrash guitaring. Kerry King has kind of grown a bit of an ego and thinks they're like the best band ever created. And the last thing that I'm not a big fan of Slayer for is the fact that they, you know, Tom Araya sings about like death and anti-Christian stuff and like Satan and different things like that. Yet he's a Catholic. He's a Christian Catholic. So he's, in my opinion, he's a bit of a hypocrite, and he doesn't practice what he preaches, basically, which is kind of funny considering, you know, Testament and their practice what they preach album. But anyways, yeah, I'm not a big fan of them, but I know they've got their following, and if you're a fan of Slayer, good on you. I would never criticize you for liking Slayer or enjoying them. You know, if that's what you enjoy, it makes you happy, by all means, turn it up to 11. But besides the Bay Area, thrash, and the Big Four, there's also a German scene coming up pretty close around the same time, that being Kreator, Sodom, Destruction, and Tankard. Kreator formed in 1982 and released their first album, Endless Pain, in 1985. Really good album. Definitely influenced a fuck ton of different bands to come and has a great following. Their most recent album, Gods of Pain, I think that's what it is. Gods of Violence. Sorry, Gods of Violence is actually really good. I'm gonna be picking that shit up for sure. Really great part of the Teutonic 4 lineup. Probably one of the best. And they are just like nailing it out of the park. Pretty much every album after Endless Pain. I think they had like one or two that some people aren't the biggest fan of, but like for the most part, Kreator is some solid thrash metal. Next is Sodom. Sodom's kind of like one of those proto black metal, proto thrash, proto death metal bands, but they're a thrash band. Once again, started in 1981. Their first album, Obsessed by Cruelty, was released in 1986. I actually showed off the album in I think the last video I had, and it's really good. Really enjoy it. I'm probably going to be picking up a lot more Sodom albums in the future. Definitely check them out if you have not. Once again, like if you're into the black metal, check them out. If you're into death metal, check them out. Obviously, if you're into thrash, you probably already know about them, so I don't need to tell you to check them out. The next band on here is a band I'm kind of slowly more and more getting into. The vocals are a little iffy for me, but I think they'll grow on me. And that's Destruction, who started in 1982. And their first album was Infernal Overkill in 1985. I actually really dig the cover art for that. It's like this exploding skull with like a mushroom cloud coming up out of it, and just like pieces of it flying off, like this kind of like this yellow and orange and red like color theme. Really cool. I definitely want to get it anyways, just because it's one of the Teutonic 4 and I really enjoy it. But yeah, I'm going to delve more into Destruction and kind of see how I feel about them. But Infernal Overkill is definitely worth checking out if you have not checked it out for whatever reason. And the last band in the Teutonic 4 is Tankard, and they started in 1982. Their first album being Zombie Attack in 1986. They're basically like an alcoholic driven like madmen type of group for thrash. Their style is all right in my opinion. It's probably going to take a little bit of getting used to for me, but I know they got a huge following. I know a lot of dudes and bands love that band, and you know, really draw from them. So if you like thrash, check out Tankard. Good stuff. A lot of the themes that go into thrash are probably what you'd think. War, death, partying and beer, like Tankard for instance. But they also tackle things like politics, and they also tackle things like religion and even anti-Christianity, because, like I said earlier, thrash kind of also took from punk and hardcore a bit, and punk bands and hardcore bands kind of had their politics and their philosophies put into their music as well, and how they felt about how the government was running things, and how the world was in general, and about like the presidents and the goings on of just different political issues. And they also had a problem with authority, so that being any sort of religion or any sort of police, and there's a lot of police brutality, there's a lot of corruption in the churches and stuff, so you would definitely see things like that in the theme of thrash and stuff. So pretty decent topics, not just like random gore all the time, and not just talking about partying all the time. There's some actually pretty solid themes going on within the thrash genre. If you want some recommendations for documentaries at all, definitely check out Get Thrashed, the story of thrash metal, and Seek and Destroy, the heavy metal documentary. Headbanger's Ball, or A Headbanger's Journey, is also okay, but it doesn't cover strictly thrash. It covers like a bunch of different genres, and even kind of like the origin of metal in general, but it's alright. There's a couple more you can check out on YouTube if you're interested in kind of delving more deeper into it and checking out more stuff beyond this video. But yeah, so that's pretty much the origins of thrash. Just basically the punk and hardcore mixed with metal for like the speed and aggression and politics and different things like that. And it was kind of like the stance against glam and hair metal, and bands like Iron Maiden, Venom, Motorhead, and Judas Priest kind of were the main bands that inspired these thrash metal bands to kind of start doing what they're doing. And another few bands besides like the Big Four and the Teutonic Four were some decent Canadian bands back in the day too, like Annihilator. They formed in 1984 with their first album called Alice in Hell, put out in 1989. Definitely check them out. The vocals are kind of for me. Maybe I'll check out some like later albums in their discography and see if it's any different. Because I know they've had a few different vocalists, so if you don't really like the Alice in Hell vocals, maybe check out some other stuff, like what I'm going to do. There's also a band called Sacrifice from 1983, their first album, check it out, Torment and Fire, which was released in 1986. As well, Razor, who is also in 1983, their first album, Armed and Dangerous, was in 1984. They're actually a really good, really like standard kind of like aggressive Canadian thrash metal band, so definitely check out Razor. If you subscribe to the Metalhead box at all, there is like a Razor shirt and I think maybe a Razor CD in one of the boxes, so you might be familiar with them from that. And the last Canadian band that I want to talk about, also another one that I'm not a big fan of the vocals of, is Voivod. I believe they're from Quebec, and they started in 1982. And their first album wasn't released though until 1984, being War and Pain. They don't just do thrash though, they kind of also have progressive stuff. I think they have some power metal stuff in there, here and there as well. They might even touch on some odd death metal, but I'm not sure. But they're a pretty decent thrash metal band from Canada, so check out Annihilator, Sacrifice, Razor, or Voivod. Not your atypical thrash for the most part, but there's definitely like kind of like a unofficial Big Four from Canada. And for kind of further listening, if you want to get into more stuff beyond like the Big Four of those countries being US, Canada, and Germany, I recommend Testament, The Legacy from 1987, Overkill's Feel the Fire from 1985, Evildead's Annihilation of Civilization from 1989, Onslaught, Power from Hell in 1985, Nuclear Assault's Game Over, 1986. Actually, Nuclear Assault's Game Over is not too bad. I'll probably be getting some of their albums for sure. I kind of favor newer Onslaught as opposed to the older stuff too, but that's regardless. As well, check out Carnivore's self-titled album from 1985. It's a little different. It's not like you're like really fast, crazy thrash. It's got its moments, but it's not bad. I think most people enjoy their second album more. And then Exodus, you can't talk about thrash without mentioning Exodus's Bonded by Blood from 1985. Like pretty much every thrash fan will probably mention Exodus's Bonded by Blood, or have a T-shirt or a patch from them, or mention Bonded by Blood just in passing. But yeah, check those bands out. And if you're looking into some modern thrash, 4 really good ones that I enjoy are Toxic Holocaust, Warbringer, Havok, and Legion of the Damned. And most recently I discovered Hazzerd from Canada. They're from Alberta, and they're working on a second album as we speak. But yeah, that's just a few things to check out right now. Hope you enjoyed my origins of thrash. Hope I covered everything, you know, respectively. If you're really into thrash and I missed anything super duper important, or at least you think it is, let me know in the comments section. I'd be glad to talk about it with you and go over some of your favorite thrash bands and stuff like that. Anyways, that's it for now. For Glory, for the Rebellion, Slammerella out. Garbage. Rip Cliff Burton.